All right, welcome back to our Visual Scripting Foundations course. We are working in Unreal Engine, we are working with blueprints, and we are working on giving you all the foundational pieces that you might be missing if you have never taken a scripting course or you don't have a traditional software engineering background. Recently, we've been talking about flow control, and one of the most powerful things that we can use in flow control is called the for loop. And it allows us to work with large lists or arrays of information. So before we get into an actual example, what am I talking about? I am talking about the list of every actor in the scene, all of the enemies in the scene, all the materials on a character, all of the weapons I'm currently holding, all those kinds of things. It's more than one variable. There's a lot that we need to work with. So the for loop helps us work with arrays much more efficiently, and as always, best demonstrated by example. So let's hop into Unreal and take a look at setting up a couple of examples. And we're going to work this from very basic ground up. So what I'm going to do is let's just delete a bunch of these variables right now. And what we're going to do is we're going to use our fruits. Yeah, we'll delete this. We're going to use our fruits array that we made in a previous class. If you did not take a look at our variables addendum, container types, and you're not familiar with an array, you should probably go back and watch that video. There's a link to it in one of the info icons around here somewhere. Check that video out because you need to be familiar with arrays for this to work. So let's work with our fruits array. If I click on it, you'll notice here over on the right, we have some default values in our fruits array. We have an apple, we have a banana, we have a mango. Let's add a kiwi as well, okay? Not important as long as we have some things in our array. And if we wanted to print everything in this array, we would have to use each of the variables indexes, their address, to get the value and print it. Let's do that. I'm going to do this the hard way first to kind of show you why we want to be able to use for loops. So we're going to get our fruits array. We're going to get a reference. And in order to print the first item in our fruits array, the index that we need to use to access it is, hopefully you're thinking index 0. And so we're going to specify 0 and we're going to get the value and we are going to print it. So if we go print string, let's make the color a little bit brighter, something that we can see, and let's make our duration a little bit longer so we have time to read it, and we will just connect it in. So at this point, we have printed the first item in our array, and now I have to do this over and over and over again. So let's do this. We'll do the exact same thing. We need to print the second item, and now we're going to do the third item, which has an index of 2. Remember, the third item in the array is mango, but its address, its index is 2. For all of you that are new to arrays and stuff, we're just trying to hammer that home from the container types video. Okay, so now we've printed out the first 3 items in our array by going through and accessing each one. There's a fourth one. We added kiwi just to make things interesting. Its index, the kiwi index, is index 3. We have to make sure that we update to index 3. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3. When we run our game now, we should see printing in the top left corner. We have apple, banana, mango, kiwi in order. That is the order that we're printing them. And that is how, without a for loop, we would have to print each of the items in our array. Now, it gets worse or more entertaining depending on how you want to look at it. What happens if our array changes? So we could, for example, actually, let's do this. Let's tie this to our events class. Let's make a new event. Let's add a custom event real quick. And we're going to call this print array items. I know that that's tiny because I'm not zoomed in. And all I'm going to do is this is going to be our function for printing the array items. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to call print array items. Let's combine some class knowledge, okay? So now all that happens is this prints array items. And then one day, magically, somebody goes shopping and adds a new fruit to our basket. And let's add a blueberry, for example. So now that we have blueberries in the basket, if I want to print blueberry as well, I have to come to my print array items. I have to go all the way to the end of it. I need to take a copy of my fruits, and then I have to add this on. You're starting to get the idea. I have to update the index, and there we go. Now I can print it. This is not very dynamic. It is not very robust, and it is not very scalable. So we need a way to access and print everything in our array without having to constantly update this function. And the fun continues if I do something simple like, for example, let's just go ahead and run this. I'll show you what happens. We're going to print all of our stuff. You'll see it, apple, banana, mango, kiwi, blueberry. That's cool. But now watch what happens. If I delete an item in our array, let's delete the blueberries now. I now have to update my print array. And even worse, when I run this, I'm going to get a message in the output log saying that there is no index. There's no index 4 from the array. So it's actually created an error because that item no longer exists. And you'll see it pop up here. So what we want to do is we want a more efficient way to work with arrays. And we have one, and it's a flow control item called a for loop. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to get rid of all of this, and we are going to rebuild our print array items, and we're going to do it using the flow control of a for loop. Now, there are two different ways to use for loops. So let's talk through the simplest case first. If we drag off of fruits and we just type for here, you'll notice that there is a for each loop and a for each loop with break. We're going to be talking about just the for each loop for right now. Now, the for each loop basically has a execution pin to connect in, and then it has an array that it takes in. And what this does, what this loop does is it basically says, when we start, I'm going to take the first item in the array and I'm going to put it in a variable that is my output pin. In this case, it's the array element here. Okay, and that's it. Then the second time, it's a loop. It's going to loop over everything in the array. So then it goes back and says, do I have any more items in the array? Yes, I do. Oh, I'm going to put the second item in that output pin. And then it continues. Do I have any more items? And it keeps going. So what this is going to do is if we want to, let's print the string. This is called the loop body. So let's not connect our array element at first. What happens is we start begin play, we call print items, we come in here and we're going to go into fruits. Fruits is going to say how many items do I have in the fruits array. Right now we have 0 through 3 in our indices, and we're going to print a string during the loop body. The loop body is the part where this function is basically going over each item. And what it does is it takes each item and it puts it in this output pin, but we're not actually using that yet. So first, let's just play this and see what happens. When we do that, you'll see hello print 4 times. Why does hello print 4 times? Hello prints 4 times because we have 4 items in our array. If we add blueberries back in, let's just say I spelled that right, and we play again, you'll see that hello is going to print 5 times. The reason that hello prints 5 times is because we now have 5 items in our array. So what this is doing is this is going and it's saying for each item in the array, do the loop body. Now we know it's coming in here, the number of times for each element of the array, the number of times of elements we have in the array, and all we have to do is connect this to our print. So what's going to happen is the first time through, it's going to look at the fruits array. It's going to say, what is the first item? Apple. Put apple in the output of array element, do whatever happens in the loop body. So in this case, it's going to print the string apple. Then it's going to come back and it's going to say, do I have any more items in the array? Why, yes, I do. I have a banana. I'm going to put banana in array element and I'm going to print it. I'm going to do what's in the loop body. So I'm going to continue that until I've gone through the entire array. And then when I'm done, I'm going to continue on. When I'm completed, And this is one of the last pins that we have not mentioned, this completed pin. So we could, when we're completed, we could print another string called finished. Finished printing. So basically go through each item in the array, do what's in the loop body, and then when you're done, continue on. That's what the completed pin does for us. We'll get into the array index in a second. But for now, let's just print this out, or let's just run this and see what prints. You'll see we get apple, banana, mango, kiwi. Unfortunately, I didn't change the timing of the print, so let's do that so that we have time to read it. And let's go back to 12, for example. I'm gonna make this bright green so we can see it. And then let's go ahead and press play. You'll see apple, banana, mango, kiwi, blueberry, and then we also printed completed at the end. Now, I did not update my display time for completed. So we have that, and you can see it. So all of our fruits, and then we finished printing. That is, in a nutshell, how a for each loop works. And it's right in the name, which is super useful for us. For each element in the array, do what's in the loop body, and then when you're done, continue on. This is super powerful for example, if you want to get all the enemies in the scene and you want to add more health, or you want to do damage to them all, or you need to get a list of all of the players and you need to do something to each player. For example, award them each gold. For each player, for each loop, give them gold. These are all the kinds of things, and almost there are just so many different examples of the times that we would be potentially working on a whole array of objects in Unreal, and that is why the for each loop is your friend. So you don't have to access each index, figure out how long the array is, etc., etc. Now, what is this last pin here, this array index? What this is a way for you to print out the address of the item. In other words, if we just do, let's do an append string here. And what we can do is let's put a colon and add a pen. And what this is going to do, we'll convert this integer to a string. What this is going to do is this is going to take the array element. And the first one, we said the first array element is apple. It's going to take apple. It is going to append a colon to it. And then it is going to print the index, the address that apple lives at in the array. So it's the exact same loop. We're just printing a little bit more information so you can see what we get from the array index. So let's run that again and take a look at our results. You'll see apple 0, bananas at index 1, mango 2, kiwi 3, and so on. Now, this is amazing because now if I come along and I remove blueberry, I don't have to do anything special. Now when I run it, it'll just still work. It just prints all the way to mango. If I add in a new element, because maybe a new character spawns or a new item spawns or whatever this is, if we're extrapolating out, if I add a new item to our fruit and we do, let's say dragon fruit, for example. If we now print, you'll notice that I don't have to make any changes. All my code stays the same. I didn't change anything. And you'll notice that dragon fruit now prints. I can also change the order. I can do all of these things. But because I'm using the for loop, it is a way for me to access and do stuff with each of the elements that are stored in an array. So for each loop loops over each of the items. Now, there is another kind of for loop that we are going to use. I'm going to make some room here. This one is a little bit more manual, but it also will give you a better, it will help you solidify your understanding of arrays. So let's basically, I'm just going to disconnect our previous version of how we did this. And what we're going to do is we're going to redo this exact same thing, but with a different kind of for loop. So the other kind of for loop is a little more manual. And what you do with this one is you actually specify the start and stop. So here we go. Let's just do, let's right click out here, for, and you type loop. You'll notice that under flow control, there is a for loop that is just called plain old fashioned for loop. When you select that one, the options that you have are a little bit more detailed, okay? So if we're going to connect into our execution pen, that's the same, but you'll notice the difference is this one took the array as the argument. This one takes the first index and the last index as our arguments. So what is the last index of our fruits array? In this case, it's 4. Okay, so we're going to go 0 to 4. And then in our loop body, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to print. But before we do that, we need to figure out what we're going to print. All we're going to do is drag our array out here, and we're going to get a reference. And the item that we want to get from the array is at the index. But before we do that, here, hold on, let's back up. Let's back up a little bit. Let me show you how this one works first. So we're going to start with small steps, and all we're going to do is we're going to print the indices so that you can see them. So we're calling print array items. We're going to go from 0 to 4. We're going to loop through it, and the thing that we're going to print is the index. So when we run just this, it's going to print 0 to 4 in the top left. See, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect, because that lines up exactly with the start and stop of our array indices. Okay, let's go back. We can change these numbers to whatever we want. If I wanted to print 100, I could do it. 0 to 100. There you go. Boom. 0 to 100. So all this is doing is it's looping through and printing, going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. It's counting. That's what it's doing. Now we can also change the start. We could print 90 to 100 if we wanted to for some reason. So if we play that, you'll see we get 90 to 100. Perfect. Okay. So now that we know that this is just looping over our indices, let's change this back and we'll go 0 to 4 again. And what we want to do is we want to use this index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 to get each of the items in our array. So we're going to get the item that is in the current index. So the first time you come through this loop, you're in your loop body, the index is what? Hopefully you're saying 0. And the fruits array index 0 is what? Apple. So if we print the item that is at index 0, it is going to print apple. The second time we come through this loop, what is index? It increments it by 1, so we get 1. So the item is 1, the index is 1. If we look at our fruits array, what is at index 1? Banana. And continues, third time through it's 2, so our index is going up, we're printing each of these items. So now, if we run this, we will get the same output in the sense that we are going to print apple through dragon fruit, but we're being much more deliberate about having to specify start and end, etc. Now, you might be thinking this still runs into the resizing problem. If I delete dragon fruit, I have to update the last index. That's sort of true, but there are a couple things that I can do to make it so it's robust enough to handle the changes. If I drag out fruits and I take fruits and I get the length of it, what this is going to do, the length is get the number of items in the array. So if I get the length of fruits, and the length of fruits is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 5, okay? I can plug this in to our last index, but there's a problem. So let's plug it in and let's go ahead and run it. You'll notice that it prints everything out, but when I escape out, you'll see I get an error. I'm getting an error saying that it attempted to access index 5 from the array fruits of length 5. But because remember, arrays in Unreal Engine start at 0. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 are indices, but we gave it 0 through 5. So we need to remember that. And in this case, we're going to subtract 1 from our length, and we're going to go 0 to 4. And now this setup will do exactly what we were doing here, except we have to be a little bit more purposeful about our control. So let's run that so we can see it. And I'm going to explain to you why we would do that. Okay, so why would we do this? One of the reasons that we might do this is because by default, this allows us to have the index, the address of each of the items. So let's say that I wanted to modify everything in the array. And I wanted to change the value. And I wanted to make them, let's just do something simple. Like these fruits, they're all singular. Apple, banana, mango, kiwi. Let's just say we wanted to add an S to the end of every fruit in our array. Well, what we can do is we can now, with our fruits array, we can set the array element. And what we're going to set it to is we're going to set it to what it currently is. We're going to append an S to here. Let me disconnect this so it's not confusing to look at. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go through our fruits, 0 through the length of the fruits. We're going to get the value that's at the index 0 to start with. We're going to add an S to it. So in this case, it's going to take apple. It's going to add an S. And then we are going to update the item at index 0 to be what we just created, which in this case is, let me see if I can make this a little bit prettier to look at. All right, this will be a little easier to read. Okay, so it's going to append an S, and then it's going to reset that item at 0 to be the new value, and we're done. Now, here's the trick. We're not printing anymore, so we can't see the results of our work. So let's just run this so we can see this work, hopefully without any errors, but we won't actually see anything print because all we're doing now is updating the values. You can see that. Okay, so what we could do is when we're complete, we could do a print string. And I don't think we can connect an array straight in. No, we cannot. So what we'll do is we'll use another for loop to print them all out. Let's use this one. Let's just take this and drop it down here. Get rid of this print string. And when we're completed, what we're going to do is we're going to go through our fruits array. For each element in our fruits array, we're going to get the element, we're going to append a semicolon to it, and then we're going to print it. And then we're done, we're going to finish. So we now have 2 for loops. Our first for loop is using the indices to make updates and changes to the elements in the array. And our second for loop is just iterating through each item in the array so that we can actually print out the results of our changes. So now let's see what prints. And you can see we have apples, bananas, mangoes, kiwis, and dragon fruits, and then we finish printing. Now, this is an example of a time where you might want to use the index, where you start and stop, in order to be able to access each of the individual elements, update them, etc. It's important to understand that generally speaking, the idea is for each of your items, we're going to do a loop body action, which is all of this, okay? And then when we're done, we finish. So if we were to comment this is the loop body, and then this is the complete. Let me make this a little bit more readable. Complete. By the way I'm doing those comments is I'm just pressing the C key to create a comment. So big thing is for loop has a loop body, and then when it's finished, and in your loop body, you decide what you want to do and how you want to do it. For loops are amazingly powerful for us to be able to do different things in Unreal. Now, I want to do one more practical example of our for loops. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the for loops to change the scale of every house in our scene. Okay, let's do this. So what we'll do is we're no longer going to use print array items. We can still use our begin play. I'm going to add a new custom event, and I'm going to call it set house scales. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an input, and I'm going to call it target scale. And I'm going to use a vector for this because I want to be able to set all 3 axes, for example. Now, all we're going to do when we begin play is we're going to call set house scales. And our target scales are going to be, let's just double them. So we'll go 2, 2, and 2. And I do want to do one other thing. I want to be able to see this happen. So let's just add a delay for demo purposes. And we'll delay by 1 second. No, let's make it 2, just so we can let our eyes adjust before this happens. So what we're going to do is we're going to set house scales. In your mind, hopefully what you're thinking is, well, I need to get all of the houses in the level. Okay, so let's do that. We're going to count all the template houses in the scene. Let's do that. That way we don't have to create a whole bunch of extra blueprints and digress too much. So I'm going to alt drag this thing and just place a few of these around the level so that we have them. Now this could be, you could imagine this as being players in the scene. It could be enemies in the scene. It could be all the traps. It could be all the items that are on the ground. It could be all the gold, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. So we have all these houses in our scene. If we play, you'll notice that we have all the houses around us. So now all we need to do is we need to get a list of all of our houses. We need to get an array of all of the houses. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this is a practical example of using arrays. We are going to get all actors of class. The class that we are going to get is our house template in this case. So this is basically saying, give me all of the actors that are house templates in my scene. And what we can do is, you'll notice right off the bat, what does this return? This returns an array. You can see it by this box, which is why we've been doing all of this work to learn about arrays and how to access the items, etc. So what we're going to do is, for each of these houses, let's do a couple things. So for each loop, we just drag off, we get our for each loop. We know how to use it already. And what we're going to do is, let's do this. First, let's keep it simple. Let's get the display name. Get the display name. And what we are going to do is we're going to print it. And when we print this, nope, that's not what I want. That's not the kind of printing I want. I want to print a string, and let's print the value. So when this starts, there is going to be, begin play is going to start. There's going to be a delay. We're going to set all of our house scales. Set house scales right now doesn't actually set the house scale. What it does is it gets all the template houses in the scene, and for each one, it gets the display name and prints it. So let's see what that looks like. You'll notice it in the top left, it prints house template 2, 3, 4, it prints them all out. Perfect. After a 2-second delay. Now, what we actually want to do is we want to set the scale of each of these houses. So let's set the scale which is, we want to set the world scale 3D of, let's use the default scene root, for example. Okay, and what we are going to set the scale to be is, we're going to set it to be our target scale. So we'll just connect this up here. So now what happens is, begin play starts. Oops. Begin play starts. There's a 2-second delay. Then we're going to set our house scales. Setting our house scales simply gets a list of all the template houses in the scene and returns it as an array, which we now know that we can, with a for each loop, go through each item in the array and set the world scale 3D to be the new scale value that we passed in. The new scale value that we passed in was 2. So when we start this, we press play, we wait 2 seconds, boom, they all scale up. This is a practical example, albeit simplified, where we're getting a list of all the actors in the scene of a certain type, and we are doing an operation to all of them. We're setting the scale. Now, your operation in your own experiences, gameplays, virtual productions, all those kinds of things, is going to be probably something a lot more interesting. It's going to be things like setting their health, giving them money, granting everybody items or abilities, or finding all of the background characters in your scene and telling them all to walk a certain direction. This is why arrays are so important in Unreal Engine, because we use them for everything, because it's pretty frequent that we are working with large sets of actors and items that we want to make changes to. Now, you can have a lot more fun with this. You can do things like, for example, for all of our odd houses, we could technically do something different. Like, for example, let's do this. Let's take a mod 2, and I'm going to use a branch statement. We just finished our branch class. Okay, and if this is greater than 0, what we're going to do is we're going to set our scale to the new scale. And if it's false, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my scale to 2 times the scale, or 1.5 times. So let's do a multiply here. And let's change this pin to a float. Let's change this to 1.5 and scale this up. So now odd houses are going to be one size and even houses will be another size, if I remember how mod works. And I do need to connect my target, in this case here. So we compile and we run. Boom. So it actually looks like, yeah, they're different. It's hard to tell because it's only 1.5, but we could make this 2, for example, and it'll be a little bit more notable. So we have some that are certain sizes than the others, although I'm not sure if that's actually true. 2, 1 mod. I think maybe we want this to be equal 0. I think I have this right. Let's do equal 0. I may have the condition wrong. There we go. That's what I was expecting. I forgot how mod works. That's a whole other thing, but this is just a quick way where we are basically using everything we learned to not only, in this case, not only are we doing something for each house, but we are also using the index to do something different for odd number houses versus even number houses. So there's a lot of power here. The more you learn, the more you'll see how to do it. But in its simplest form, just setting the scale of everything in the scene, just granting health to everybody that you want to, or just doing damage to everybody around a certain area, you're going to get a return list of actors or items or whatever. You're probably going to use a for loop. You're probably going to go for each of them and you're going to say, is it an enemy or not? And if it is, do damage. And if it's an ally, don't do damage. These are the kinds of things that your understanding of arrays and for loops will allow you to do much more efficiently for all of your own visual scripting hopes and dreams. So that wraps up our for loops tutorial. If you are new to Unreal Engine, visual scripting, and blueprints in general, please hit us with your feedback. Let us know what you think. Throw it down in the comments below. If you're an Unreal guru and ace and you have thoughts on potentially alternate things that we may have covered or different ways of presenting things, love to hear that information as well. Happy to re-record or add addendums if there are pieces that we need to do that with. As always, anything you can do to support the channel would be appreciated. Share it out, whatever you think is best and appropriate. Do not forget, we have our live streams. We have a twice weekly live stream, Sunday nights at 10:15 and Wednesday mornings at 8 a.m. That's Pacific Standard Time. Follow on Twitter or check the schedule in YouTube just to make sure that those times haven't potentially changed. And hopefully with this new found knowledge, you can go out and tackle some of your own game dev virtual production hopes and dreams. We will see you in the next training tutorial. Have a good one.